Hey, my name is Chris Brennan, and joining me today is astrologer Leisa Schaim, and we're going to be doing your year ahead horoscope and astrology forecast for the zodiac sign of Taurus for the entire year of 2026. Hey, Lisa, thanks for joining me for horoscopes this year.
Hey Chris, glad to be here.
Yeah, so for our horoscopes, we recommend looking at them from the perspective of your rising sign if you know your birth time, but you can also look at them from the perspective of your sun sign if you don't know your birth time. We're going to give kind of a big picture overview of the major trends and transits and themes over the next year. So let's go ahead and just jump right into it. All right, so here's the planetary movements calendar that shows where the planets will start at the beginning of the year and where they'll get by the end of the year. And these are the major transits that we're going to focus on over the course of 2026. So, right away at the very start of the year, in the first couple of months, the major transits are the Saturn Neptune conjunction that takes place in February, and both of those planets moving from the sign of Pisces into the sign of Aries, which is moving from your 11th house of friends and groups to your 12th house, which covers things like seclusion, sometimes people you don't get along with, as well as sometimes focusing more on internal things like mental health, right?
hmm Yeah, definitely. So it's a really interesting movement anytime transits go from the 11th to the 12th because the 11th is so social. So especially for the past few years while Saturn's been in the 11th for you, and even longer back since 2011, since Neptune's been there, there's been a lot of focus on your community, social alliances and networks, groups, friends. And now you're moving more into a secluded behind the scenes area, at least with regard to these two transits. So the 12th house, you might experience sort of an unexpected shift from being used to being really out there and more like connected, but moving more into a time of potentially more contemplative focus. Behind the scenes, as I said, you could be dealing more with people you don't get along with than usual. But yeah, it's a quieter time, at least with regard to two of the transits.
Yeah, so it's finishing a period of restructuring your friends and groups and social life that's been happening since March of 2023 as Saturn's been going through your 11th house of friends and groups. And that restructuring phase is pretty much over as of this year. And now we're moving into more of an internal restructuring phase, especially to the extent that the 11th house transit over the past few years has been about restructuring things with respect to your allies. The 12th house transit can sometimes be about restructuring things and putting up better boundaries when it comes to people that you don't get along with or people that are outright enemies or that try to undermine you in your life in different ways. And sometimes putting up better boundaries can be like learning how to stand up for yourself more. For example, if there's people that are pushing your boundaries or doing things that aren't okay in your life, and learning how to address that situation better head on.
hmm It can also be a time where if you have a contemplative practice, you need to restructure that. There's something that is like old and kind of worn out, but you need to approach that in a different way, or you need to approach mental health focus in a different way than you have before. Because the thing with Saturn and Neptune together, especially with the exact conjunction, is old structures can dissolve in preparation for envisioning and making real new structures. And so that's the area of life with those several topics where you're going to be doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to peak especially in February when we have that exact Saturn Neptune conjunction take place, because that's going to be the height of what I've been calling over the past couple of years the reality distortion field, really coming into focus at that time and coming into full intensity. And for you, that may be dealing with things in terms of distinguishing between what's real and what's not when it comes to enemies or people that you don't get along with in your life. But it can also be with respect to ways in which sometimes we can be our own worst enemy or in which we can undermine ourselves, especially if we're not clear about who we are and where our actions are coming from. And you may struggle with that a little bit at the beginning of this transit because it's going to be a little hard to tell the difference between what's real and what's not. And you might want to be careful about becoming overly attached to ideas that might not be as grounded in reality. But as the year progresses and that conjunction moves further away over the next few months, I think that's going to get less and less intense so that you should start to get better clarity about some of those things.
hmm It can also just be a time where you need more downtime. You need more rest, because the 12th house is time spent away. And it's, again, that contrast with the 11th versus the 12th. You've been used to putting a lot of energy and work into the area of community lately, or friends or groups you belong to. But it's time to pull back a little bit. And oftentimes there's a need to rebalance, like um, how much downtime you give yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's happening in January and February, especially. And then our next major thing I want to talk about is the first eclipse season, which takes place starting in February and going through into March. So we're going to have an eclipse in Aquarius first in February, and then an eclipse in Virgo in March. And this is happening in your 10th house of career and your fifth house of children and fun and games and hobbies and sex and sexuality. So with eclipses, we usually see major beginnings and major endings happening in those two areas of your life, and that will be the focus of that first eclipse season this year in February and March.
hmm So the first eclipse in Aquarius in your 10th house of career and public reputation is actually the first in that series. So this will be the first time that that happens for you. So there can be sudden new developments, new beginnings or new endings with regard to career, with regard to work that you do. If you have supervisors at work, it can also relate to like bosses coming or going. But yeah, in general, it's like how you show up in public will be the arena for that first beginnings and endings chapter.
Yeah. So sometimes that could be like ending one job and starting another, or sometimes ending one career chapter of your life and then starting a new chapter, even if it's within the same job. So sometimes that can
hmm
happen in terms of like promotions, or like you said, maybe a boss changeover taking place and different things like that. But having this real sense that there's a major beginning and a major ending that's taken place. And since that's the start of a new series of eclipses in Aquarius, that's going to play out over the course of the next year or two rather than be something that happens all at once.
right. And there is also an extended Pluto transit going in that house as well, but that's very, very long and drawn out for about 18 more years. But you'll see that accentuation of some of those themes of death and rebirth when the eclipses actually trigger that house more acutely.
Sure. And then we're also having an eclipse in Virgo in your fifth whole sign house, which is major beginnings and endings when it comes to especially the topic of children. If you have children, or in some instances with an eclipse in the fifth house, it can be people having children, and that can be the major beginning that happens there. In other instances, if you already have children, there can be some sort of ending that happens there, which can be something as simple as like one of your children reaching an important new stage and turning point in life, like for example, graduating high school or something like that, that represents an ending as well as a new beginning. But that's one of the major areas with respect to children. It can also relate to things like fun and games and hobbies. So having a major eclipse take place there, a major new beginning could be taking up a new hobby or finding some new way to start something in your life that brings in themes of fun and enjoyment and pleasure and makes your life worth living, even more so than it already was.
Yeah, so it can be just a change up of like what brings you pleasure, you know. So yeah, that can be as you said, changes around children, but also changes around hobbies you do, sports you play, things you do for fun. Sexuality also goes in the fifth house. Dating can go there as well.
Yeah, dating, that's a really important one. There could be important things in your dating life taking place with this transit, especially with more casual relationships.
hmm
Um, Yeah, so that's the fifth house thing. And this is part of an ongoing series because this eclipse series started already, was happening in 2025. And we've got one more Virgo eclipse that goes through into early 2027. So this is sort of like
hmm
the middle point in a series of events that's been unfolding that we're now in the center point in at this stage.
Right. Yeah, and with the eclipse series, it's not the case that something will change with each and every eclipse there, but you can say reliably for sure within at least that series of eclipses. So if something hasn't shifted for you yet in that area, this can be times where that's more likely.
Absolutely. All right, so let's move on. Our next major transit is that Uranus is finally going to be departing from the sign of Taurus from your rising sign in April, and it's going to be moving into the sign of Gemini for good, which is it's moving out of your first house of mind and body and self, where it's been making some radical changes over the course of the past at least like 7 years since 2018, 2019. And now Uranus is moving into your second house of money and finances and possessions, where it's going to take some of that exciting, fast-paced, like liberating energy that you've been experiencing in the house of self over most of the past decade, and it's going to start applying that to your finances.
hmm So there'll be one last accentuation in February in particular. So Uranus will still be in Taurus for the first 4 months of the year, until April. In February in particular, Uranus stations for the last time in Taurus, and then inner planets go on to square that all month. So there will be one kind of last hurrah around the changes you've been experiencing around your identity, your sense of self, or practices surrounding your body or health. Um, your sense of who you are has been changing a lot over the last 7 years. And then after that, it will move into the second house of personal income and finances. So you'll bring that innovative energy into the house of money. So how you make a living can change, bringing potentially greater involvement with technology, especially if you do, say, remote work. That can be part of it. Oftentimes, people want to innovate with how they make a living when it goes into their second house, and it's a process of either, yeah, just trying to make it possible to be more independent sometimes in how you make a living.
Yeah, seeking greater independence and freedom with regard to income and possessions and things like that is often a major theme. We got a little bit of a preview of that last year when Uranus first moved into Gemini in July, but then it retrograded back out. But now it's moving into that sector of the chart for good until the early 2030s. So this is part of a long-term transit, and you want to pay attention to when a long-term transit begins, if there's any significant changes that start happening early on, like starting from April forward, because sometimes that can be a sign of a much bigger change that happens over the course of the rest of this decade. But seeking greater freedom, sometimes that can mean moving more in the direction of self-employment in some instances, can be one way that that works out with Uranus going in the second house. It can
Mhm.
also involve leveraging technologies, especially new and innovative technologies, in order to increase your income or to create multiple income streams can be another theme as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So it'll be a process. It won't be like a once and done thing, but yeah, you'll start to, if you haven't already in 2025, especially the second half of 2025, you will definitely start to see that theme emerge more and more as you go on with 2026.
Absolutely. All right, so let's move on to our next major transit, which is that the planet Jupiter is going to spend the first half of the year in Cancer, which is in your third house of siblings, communication, and short distance travel. And then starting in late June, Jupiter is going to move into the sign of Leo, which is your fourth house of home and living situation and parents and private life. So this is going to be a major transit that divides basically like the first half of the year versus the second half of the year.
hmm So Jupiter went into Cancer in the summer of 2025, so it's already been there half a year. Then the first half of 2026, it will still go through Cancer. So your third house, it's bringing expansiveness, potentially like abundance, greater positivity around third house topics. So that can be how you communicate or what you use to communicate with. It can be things involving your siblings or cousins, other extended relatives. Neighbors or immediate neighborhood is definitely a third house topic. And sometimes education, so teaching, learning, speaking, writing, etc. There's still expansiveness going on for the first half of the year there.
Yeah, so having like Jupiter go through the third house, this is going to be some of the most positive transits of the year for those that were born with day charts. Jupiter going from the third to the fourth house in your chart, and something simple with like a positive benefic transit through the third house like this could be something as simple as like learning a new language and like
Mm.
expanding your ability to communicate, or finding new avenues to communicate in your in your life, whether through writing, whether through public speaking. It could be something like, starting to write a blog or a journal or doing a podcast or something like that. But basically taking advantage of a period in your life where the potential for growth through communication is heightened above other times in your life could be great to really take advantage of this for the first 6 months of 2026.
Definitely. And then Jupiter for the second half of the year will go into Leo, which is your fourth house, which involves home, family, things involving parents, potentially your ancestry, living situation, and your private life. So it's interesting because it's Leo, which is more of a like a warm, like a warmth and kind of outward energy, but it's in the fourth house of home and your private life. So that can be things like expanding literally where you live. It can be expanding things around just greater involvement with your family, greater time spent around your family, whether immediate family or extended family. Um, but it's an interesting trine, Jupiter and Leo. Once it goes in there, it trines Saturn and Neptune in Aries. And those are both in private areas of your chart. So even though it's this like kind of warm, expansive energy with Jupiter and Leo, it's still kind of in the area of chart that not everyone sees, right?
Yeah, I think it's more of the private life as opposed to the 10th house, which is more of the public life. But the main thing is the family focus and orientation, both of like the third house transit at the first half of the year, which is like siblings, neighbors, extended relatives. But then in the second half of the year, it's especially like your parents and your immediate home and living situation. So one thing that's good for transits like this is that it can just be a period in which you get along with some of your most immediate family members better, or if you've had any sort of challenging relationship or tensions with especially like parents in recent times, it can be a good time to smooth things over and to improve the bonds of those relationships. Similarly, when you have a benefic transit like this in the fourth house, it can also be about just improving things at home, just because
Mhm.
you're going to be going through a good period for home and living situation. So it can be moving into a new place where you get really lucky. It can be doing home improvement projects at home, or even doing some sort of expansion of something in your home and living situation. But it's a good idea to take advantage of this positive energy because, sometimes things can be more problematic or it can run into issues at home, but other times it can be more positive. And this is definitely bringing some positive energy there in the second half of the year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of that, though, around this time in the middle of the year, around June, we notice there's this really auspicious Venus-Jupiter conjunction that's taking place in Cancer, because we recently completed our 2026 electional astrology report, where we went through and we tried to identify the most fortunate dates in 2026 for taking actions and doing different things based on the principles of electional astrology. So in this report, we pick out the two best dates we can find and electional charts for every month of 2026. And this includes a video, an audio, and written report where we go through and give a more detailed forecast of each month, but we help to guide you through if you need to do things during different months, what days you should gravitate towards doing them versus which days are better to avoid.
Yeah, so anytime you need to take important actions or start new projects, new life events that you want to go well, this will give you a better start in terms of the best possible results if you use these dates and times to start those actions. So we have two for each month. We've expanded it a bit this year and even some bonus charts beyond that. So really helpful for planning your year ahead.
Absolutely. So there's 28 charts plus tutorials. You can use them for business, for love, or other major life events. And we're doing a launch sale for just the first month where it's only $49.95 until the beginning of January, and then the price is going to go up to the regular price of $65. So you can find out more or get the report at theastrologypodcast.com/2026 report. All right, so that brings us to the second half of the year. Once we're finished talking about that Jupiter transit, where starting in August, into early September, we get into our second eclipse season of major beginnings and major endings. And this eclipse, set of eclipses, takes place in Leo and Pisces in August, and it bleeds over a little bit into early September. But this is happening in the fourth house of home and living situation, as well as the 11th house of friends and groups.
Right. So, and this is the first eclipse in Leo. We're moving into the Aquarius Leo series. We had the first Aquarius one in the spring, and now the first Leo one in your fourth house of home and family. And so you've already got Jupiter transiting there in the second half of the year, bringing greater expansiveness to those topics. But then the eclipses kind of bookend little chapters of your life. Sometimes important beginnings and endings occur around eclipses in a certain area of your chart. So that will be the case for you for that same sector of your chart that we were talking about with the Jupiter transit through Leo. So home, family, parents, ancestry, private life, living situation. So it's not only a time to bring greater expansiveness or positivity to those areas, to those topics, but also potentially like important changes happening within that time period.
Yeah, so this really makes it clear that Leo in the fourth house of home and living situation and family and parents and private life is going to be the major focus of this year, I think, because we just keep seeing this area of the chart come up over and over again, and we'll see it in one more transit at the end of the year as well. So major beginnings and major endings when it comes to your home and living situation, as well as your parents and what's happening in their life, as well as your relationship with your parents, is the focus of this first eclipse in August. And then the second eclipse is 11th house focused with friends and groups and alliances. And this is sort of completing a process of eclipses that's been taking place there for the past couple of years, indicating major beginnings and major endings with friends and groups. And this is going to be the final one that sort of brings things full circle in probably ending some ways in which you've been doing social things over the past couple of years, but also opening up a whole new chapter of your life then after this point that should be pretty good.
Yeah, this is the end cap in that area for you, not only because it's the last eclipse in Pisces after several of them, but it's also the tail end of that Saturn Neptune transit that ends in the beginning of the year. There's been a lot of focus there on that friends and groups area for you. And so this is will be the last little end cap to that focus. And then there really won't be nearly as much focus in that area after this point.
Yeah, I think it's good because Saturn not being there now will just alleviate some of the heaviness surrounding friends and groups that's been there for the past few years. And
Mm,
now we just are sort of giving yourself a fresh start when it comes to maybe making new friends, going out and exploring new social environments and other things like that.
hmm
Yeah, so that's the eclipse season. That's our second eclipse season, August through early September. And then that takes us into the Venus retrograde that's going to happen in Scorpio and Libra, especially in October and November, where it's going to be retrograding from your seventh house of relationships to your sixth house of work and health matters. So that's going to be a significant transit taking place around the third quarter and early into the fourth quarter of the year.
hmm So Venus retrogrades in those areas can have you revisiting your connections with partners, whether partnership, like a marriage partner, or business partners, even. They both go in the seventh house, and just reworking, revisiting, like what are our agreements? What are our dynamics? Sometimes kind of snafus can come up in those interpersonal areas to sort of rework after Venus goes direct. And then it goes into your sixth house after that, which can be people who do any work for you or coworkers, and also things like your health, your workplace, and pets or other animals. So connections in those the Venus retrograde can connect those two topics in the retrograde series, or they can be separate things that you revisit in succession.
So I think you're saying this would be a good time to get married to your pets, is what I'm hearing. That connection between the
It's a it's a good time to revisit your strong one-on-one connections with your animals.
okay, and the bonds that tie you together.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is a classic Venus retrograde because it's happening in the seventh house for Taurus risings. That's a classic, like revisiting relationships from the past. So in some instances, it's going to be actual people or romantic or business relationships from your past coming back into the present. Sometimes that may give you the opportunity to like restart an old relationship, let's say with an old flame. In some instances, that can work and go perfectly well. And this can be the time in your life when that happens. In other instances, it can be more subtle, where it's just like people from your past coming back into the present and remembering some of the good things about those things in the past, but not necessarily deciding to like do that again, but instead just having a reminder for some reason of things or people from your past. So that's
Mhm.
the seventh house piece of this, but then there's also the sixth house piece, which can be connecting things with work and health. So sometimes maybe it could be like workplace things, or let's say a workplace relationship from the past or something like that that comes back into the present, and needing to review some of those connections before moving forward into the future.
Hmm. Yeah, and sometimes it is people literally coming back from the past in those areas. And at other times, it's just revisiting how you're connected, what your connection is like with people in those areas. And maybe there's things that need to be renegotiated, which is a very kind of common Venus retrograde dynamic.
Yeah, for sure. Or even like, let's say, taking care, somebody from a relationship from the past comes back into your life because of a health issue and you need to take care of them or something like that. Could be a scenario of a Venus retrograde from the seventh to the sixth. Or,
Mm-hmm.
for some people, for people with night charts, I think this is going to be the most positive transit of the year, basically, for those that were born at night. But for those that were born at day, you could get some of the more tricky sides of the Venus retrograde, where sometimes there can be issues that arise with relationships. And then those scenarios, it could be more of a situation where, for example, if there was like a workplace relationship, that could be more tricky or problematic during this time. So you might want to be more cautious about that.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. So that's the Venus retrograde in October and November. And then moving forward, our last major transit of the year is one that's starting to build in the entire last quarter of the year, where Mars starts slowing down as it's moving through Leo and Virgo from September through December. And it's getting ready to station retrograde in Virgo, which it's not going to do until the beginning of January of 2027. But I want to mention it here because it's already building up to that, and it's starting an extended stay through two sectors or through two houses of your chart during that last few months of the year, which is your fourth house of home and living situation and parents, and your fifth house of children and hobbies and fun and game and sex and sexuality. So that Mars is just going to be kind of like camping out in that sector of your chart for the last 4 months of the year.
Yeah, which means Mars is, even though it's not going to be actually retrograde until the beginning of 2027, it's already slowing down. So it's already spending longer in those two areas of your life than normal. And it's also getting ready to retrograde, when meaning you're getting a preview during the last quarter of 2026 of what you will need to rework. In some cases, there can be greater conflicts or problems that come up in those areas of life. And at other times, it's just you're going to spend a lot of effort in these areas for some reason. I can see, for instance, some scenarios for some Taurus rising people where, with the Jupiter transit in the fourth house of home and family, and the eclipse, the first eclipse there, and Mars getting ready to retrograde there, some people will be getting ready to move. And that's like an extra effortful thing around the fourth house, right? Like that's a
Mhm.
kind of a common scenario that could look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with Mars transits, it's tricky because there can sometimes be tension or conflict that come up. Since this is connecting the fourth house and the fifth house, for those with children, it could be some sort of tensions in terms of your children and your home life. So perhaps there's like a question or attention in terms of like a child who's now an adult, but maybe is still living at home, and maybe some tensions over them still living at home with you. Or
Mm,
maybe because it's a retrograde, sometimes that can bring people from your past back into your life. So it could be a child who like moves back in with you as an adult, maybe later due to some sort of issues that they're dealing with at this time.
mm,
But it's that theme of sometimes tensions, but also something coming back from the past or something coming back that you have to review in the present from something you've experienced previously. So, for example, Mars retrogrades happen in the same spot about every 15 years. So, this Mars retrograde would have occurred 15 years ago, which would have been what, like 2011 or something like that?
2011, yeah.
Yeah, there would have been some similar themes. So you can think back to that time for a potential preview of some of the topics that might arise in your life at this time.
hmm And something nice that we do have going on is that Jupiter is going to be there at the same time, which is definitely not always the case with the Mars, retrograde cycle. So there's going to be something really positive counterbalancing that Mars transit.
Yeah, it's like we have all of the positive stuff that was happening with, Jupiter going through Cancer in the fourth house of home and living situation and parents early in the year and positive expansion. Then we had major beginnings and major endings there with the Leo eclipse that was taking place in August. But now this Mars energy, at the very least, in its most constructive form, especially for those of you with night charts, is going to make you put a lot more energy and a lot more work into this area of your life, where maybe you're taking on new responsibilities or taking on a new project that's just causing you to have to expend an extended amount of energy in that area. So
hmm
something maybe connecting your fourth house could be like a project at home where you're doing like a major redesign or renovation or something like that, that you're actually physically involved in putting more manual labor in than usual.
Could be. Or even if you're not doing the physical work yourself, it could be, just that work is going to be done on your house at this time. Um, you have to know that anything you do start at this time is just going to take longer than usual, though. And that's a really common thing with Mars going retrograde is like having to rework some parts of it when and that part is not going to happen until the next year. But it's like just kind of plan for that, that whatever you're starting at this time will be an extended project of whatever you're putting your effort towards.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of that'll start becoming clear towards the end of the year because this is just the initial preview of that energy building up here from September to December. But then it's going to become much more the focus starting in January of 2027. But that's starting to take us into next year. So we should probably not go too far into like the following year's forecast yet, right?
Yeah, I think we don't need to do the 2 to 3 year forecast, just 2026.
Okay, awesome. Well, I think that's our ma last major transit of this year, then, in terms of this horoscope for Taurus for 2026. So, those are your major transits. Like we said, for help planning the year, get our 2026 Electional Astrology report, which is on sale for like 23% off, but only until January. And you can get that at theastrologypodcast.com/2026 report. If you want to learn more about our approach to astrology that we use here for horoscopes, check out my Hellenistic astrology course at theastrologyschool.com. But otherwise, good luck in 2026, and we'll see you again next year.